In May 2020, current UCL History students came together to reflect on their experiences at UCL History and to pass on their tips and advice to future cohorts of incoming undergraduates through a series of thematic panel discussions. The idea underpinning the project is for current students to help future cohorts to transition smoothly into life in our department and to create a stronger sense of community within the department. The project is led by Dr. Chloe Ayrton and Dr. Patrick Lanchner and builds on the work that the two of them started with the History Society at the Induction weekend in 2019, where they hosted a panel discussion with students on the theme of being a historian at university. Building on the concept of hosting panel discussions with current students, over the course of 4 days in May 2020, current students and history tutors came together to reflect on the experience of studying history at UCL and life in London. This video is one of the 9 panel discussions that we produced for the project. Welcome to our first panel discussion with current UCL history students. This is Panel 1, Being a Historian at University, What I Wish I Knew in My First Week of First Year. This discussion forms part of our UCL History Undergraduate Induction Student Panels Discussions project.
Hi, my name is Jade Burroughes. I'm a third year history student here at UCL and I'm co-convener of this project alongside Chloe. My particular research interests are situated in gender history in modern Germany, particularly sexual violence in the Holocaust. I will be pursuing these interests further as of October at the University of Oxford, where I'll be doing a Masters in Modern European History, and I am also the current UCL History Society President.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm a third year student going into my 4th year as I did my year abroad at the University of British Columbia, the Vancouver campus. During my degree, my main interests are the history of Latin America and the history of drugs. Hopefully, after my undergraduate, I am going to do a master's in either history or migration policy.
Hi there, my name's Toby and I'm a third and final year history student at UCL. During my degree, I had a particular interest in religious relations in the early modern period, specialising in my final year on the Ottoman Empire. My extracurricular activities that I have interest in include working for the International Relations Society, being involved with the cross-country team and the Christian Union.
Hi, my name's Sinead Owen. I'm a third year undergraduate history student at UCL, and I've been fortunate enough to study a really diverse range of modules, but my specific areas of interest are the history of crime and punishment in 20th century America, as well as American history in Hollywood film.
Hi, I'm Jude. I'm in my final year. I did my dissertation on the 16th century Caribbean and looked at English and Spanish racial attitudes towards Black Africans. I'm also interested in religious history in medieval Europe and any kind of intellectual history. I'm probably going to do a master's, but I'm not entirely sure when or where. I'm just kind of sussing out the current situation.
Hi, my name is Kristen Allison and I am a second year History with a Year Abroad student. I am hoping to go to the University of California, Santa Barbara at some point in 2021, and I am particularly interested in American foreign policy and immigration history. As with most 20-year-olds, I'm not really sure what I want to do in the future, but I am interested in possibly going into diplomacy or working for NGOs.
Hi, I'm Chloe Ayrton. I'm a lecturer here in the History Department at UCL, and I am leading, along with my colleague Dr. Patrick Lanchner, this really exciting project called UCL History Student Induction Video Resources, which really is part of the work that he and I are both doing in September to welcome in the new cohort of incoming undergraduate students. And we've been leading a series of panel discussions with current students to talk about various themes of life as a history student here at UCL. And you'll be seeing quite a lot of me over the course of these videos because I am chairing all of the discussions.
I guess I wanted to sort of start off asking you to remember back to that time, right, when you arrived in London, either from another borough in London where you might have already lived or from another city or country, and to think a little bit about that induction week, right? There's a week before school starts, before classes start, where you are on campus and there's various things you're supposed to be doing. And I just wanted to ask you, what is that? What is that induction week? What purpose does it serve? And what do you wish you'd known about it? When you came in, you didn't know anything about it. What do you wish you'd known about that moment, shall we say? So I don't know if perhaps we could, maybe I'll draw on, I'll ask, one person to speak, and then perhaps you can all sort of share your experiences. But, one of the things that struck me when I first got here as a lecturer from, come from the US, was about the fact that this induction week is kind of divided, right? We have the sort of bureaucratic administrative induction of like explaining to you all the things that you have to do and sign up to, and it's all really, really important information, how the degree works. And then there's this kind of other induction, the induction into the academic community, right, which traditionally has taken place over a weekend in Cumberland Lodge, but now might be different. And sort of there are these two kind of parallel things going on by the department at the same time. And so I'm just wondering, if you can remember back to that time, and what you wish you'd known about it. So perhaps I could just ask Jade to start, and then see if other panelists have any ideas.
Yeah, so I think for me, the biggest thing coming into university was making friends. I was terrified. I come from quite a small school, so I had a very tight group of friends for a very long time. And meeting new people was something I hadn't done for a very long time, so it was all a bit of a learning curve. The induction week is very helpful in doing this, because it forces you to meet new people it's kind of an informal setting, so it's like quite easy to just get chatting to people. And I think the one thing I wish I'd known when I came here was that everyone is in the same boat. Like, everyone's nervous. Even if they're acting like very outwardly confident, everyone is terrified. And everyone will appreciate if you come up and spark a conversation with them. They're not going to just turn around to you and be like, no, I don't want to speak to you. Like, that never happens. And I think a big thing is just kind of putting yourself out there and taking that leap of faith. And it always pays off, because everyone is in the exact same boat. In terms of, obviously, we went to Cumberland Lodge, but generally in induction week, I think another big thing is that don't be afraid to speak to lecturers and get to know them, like, from day one. Because coming from school, I heard a lot of rumours about university, and the vibe I was getting was that you can't really have close personal relationships with people like academic staff, because they've got better things to do. Like, that was kind of the vibe I got, but that's just not the case at UCL History at all. Like, all of the academics are so happy to speak to you and like kind of probe what your interests are and like what you might want to like further pursue. And they're just happy to speak to you generally, because they are like people, even though they're like world leading academics, like they're like very happy to chat with you, and everyone just wants to make you feel welcome. So I think that's quite an important thing to remember. Yeah.
So I was talking with Toby earlier in the week about this issue of the induction, and I wonder, what do you think, Toby, about it?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo all what Jade said. I think she's so right about it. I came from a slightly different background, so I came from overseas. So I'd grown up abroad, and I had absolutely no roots or anchors or anything at all in London. I was like, this is a huge alien place. I'm sure it would, even if you've grown up in London, it's still a bit kind of risky and scary to kind of move to somewhere like UCL. And I think that I was really quite keen to establish bonds and links as early as possible. I think we agreed that the best way to do that was by engaging things that might seem a little bit risky. So going up to people, things that are outside your comfort zones, trying out new things that you have never encountered before. And often those things that might be a little risky, some might go wrong, but they often lead to really fruitful relationships and bonds that will continue throughout the duration of your course. Similarly, on Jade's point about connecting with lecturers, I kind of thought they kind of were all these kind of aloof people out there that I could never in any way engage with. But actually, the lecturers that I went up to and spoke to and kind of sparked conversations with really early on were those that I kept coming back to quite regularly throughout the 3 years, that just knew a little bit about me and saw me develop intellectually, knew where I was kind of going and what direction I was going, were able to feed me lots of really exciting and interesting ideas that I was able to keep going with during my course. So, my big stress, and I think Jade was saying the same, is, take risks, go out there, don't be afraid to kind of step out into areas that might seem a little bit unknown, because they are tremendously profitable, both from a personal standpoint and from an intellectual and academic standpoint.
So interesting, isn't it? This idea of really making the most of that week and being present and going to things that you have no idea what they're going to be like, whether they'll be interesting or not, but all of these relationships might come out of it and really be the kind of building blocks of your undergraduate degree. Lisa, we were having this conversation earlier, weren't we, about that importance of that induction week and sort of that difference between the academic side and the sort of learning the sort of bolts, I guess, of how UCL works. But what are your thoughts?
I think for me, quite a big thing was societies and actually going out and finding your society, going to the Freshers' Fair, even though I don't know how this is going to work this year, but definitely trying to make the most out of the taster sessions. And some of the closest friends I've made are people I've met through my sports society. And definitely, if you're an incoming history student, the UCL History Society is your first port of call where you should go, as there's always a Facebook page organized for incoming fresher students, and there's always group chats made there, and all the events, all the introductory stuff are quite separate from the academic. So, because we normally do an event a day before the introductory freshers week, so you can go into your first introductory lecture having met a few people on the Sunday night before, which is quite nice. And I think Jade can probably speak a bit more about that, as she is the current History Society president and I'm the old one.
Yeah, so what you were saying about Sunday is like completely spot on. So I remember this year we ran it at a slightly different point, but it was still before official induction. And I remember one of my favorite things to see was freshers like getting to know each other, and then they were like, oh, do you want to meet up tomorrow to go to the induction event? So it's that having someone there to like navigate your way around campus, which can be quite a scary experience, but like meeting before the official like induction event starts, it just makes the whole thing like a lot less scary. And kind of on a side note, but like linking to what Toby was talking about earlier about like making connections within the department as well, and like the fact that they lecturers actually take like quite like an interest in your personal life as well as like your academic development, because they're quite interlinked. Like the whole time you're throughout UCL, you'll learn that. But I've got a specific example. So my writing history tutor in first year, his name's Harry. He was a PhD student at the time, and we are still in contact now. And he just recently wrote my reference for Oxford. So it is really beneficial to make those really good connections and get to know your lecturers on quite a personal level, because that way they are like well equipped to write you a good reference, because they'll know you very well. So yeah.
You know, it's so interesting hearing you all talk about this, because of course with the power of hindsight we realized how significant all these relationships and information that we get in induction week can be for the rest of our degrees, and how formative it is, friendships we might make that might go on for years. But I guess one of the things that I'm a personal tutor, and so 2 years ago I had the incoming students come in, and last year I was the co-organizer of Cumberland Lodge. So I've had quite a lot of contact with incoming students. And, you know, some students are totally ready to go, you know, they're just really excited. There are other students who feel a bit terrified, right? The whole thing of they can't quite visualize what university is going to be like. And they also might feel like they don't belong here. You know, perhaps it was a mistake, right, that they got an offer from UCL, and they might meet people who intimidate them. So I feel like there's, you know, all of you have probably also experienced that a little bit, like how to get over those fears and realize that everyone else is in the same boat, especially in that kind of early week, you know, the first weeks of your university degree in year one. So I wonder whether anyone's, you know, got any thoughts about that, you know, especially in that early moment of arriving and feeling like you do belong here. And obviously we have an induction program that tries to bring you in and introduce you to those lecturers and fellow students and senior students. But yeah, I just wonder if anybody has any thoughts on that particular issue of managing the imposter syndrome in those early days. What about Sinead? I think we were talking about it, weren't we, like a few days ago? Issue.
Yeah, I think it can be quite, however excited you are about college, it can still be quite scary, a bit of an intimidating thing. You know, for a lot of people, you're leaving, whether it's like your country or your hometown, coming to London of all cities, and you know, UCL of course is an amazing university, and you know, this whole idea of imposter syndrome is something that I think affects quite a lot of people when they come into first year. And I think one of the best ways to kind of get over that is realizing that, you know, you all got in based on the same requirements. You know, no one is necessarily better than anyone else. And to be honest, it's probably just a difference in confidence levels that make you feel that way. So if you're seeing someone who's really loud and expressing their opinions, it's not a difference in ability. It's not that you're not supposed to be there, or the mistake that just maybe they've had more practice at voicing those opinions in like an environment where maybe your school had like debate clubs and things like that, like maybe yours didn't. So I think, you know, it takes a bit of adjusting sometimes, but there's so many like events that are put on for you to get to people and feel more comfortable during that first week. And, you know, whether it's in a more social environment or even in the seminars, like your tutors really help kind of bring you out of your shell when you go through that kind of imposter syndrome thing where you're frightened to speak up.
Just continuing on from what Sinead was saying, I think it's really important that something that I feel I haven't really realised until second year is going on from the first week of induction and actually starting your classes, which can be really scary. When your professors are some of the world leading experts in their field, it can feel intimidating to talk, and a lot of people, as Sinead was saying, might sound more confident and sound like they know what they're talking about, but they're just as scared as you are. And I would really promote just saying, contributing anything to the discussions. It's really important. It really helps your degree. And, you know, I only started doing that in second year because I was terrified in first year. And I thought I was in classes with second years and I thought they know way more than I do. And I can confirm for you as a second year that that is not the case. And I've been in classes where first years where I'm shocked by how much they know. And they've been so impressive. So I think, you know, don't worry about that. And I think generally what we've all been talking about is just throwing yourself into it academically and socially. And in induction week, it is very stressful for everybody. And as everybody's been saying, you're all in the same boat. And even if it's online at the beginning of first term, you know, remember that everybody else in this year is also going through the same thing. They're also worried about making friends if university's online. So you don't need to worry about that so much. And hopefully at some point when we can come back to university, you will make friends. And the university, I can promise you, will make an effort to make sure that you can socialize and meet people.
I think to kind of build on that, what you guys both said, personal example, I was so intimidated by Toby, actually, who is in this panel, when he was asking questions during Cumberland Lodge, during concepts, which is now called approaching. But, you know, even if you don't feel too confident to start asking questions, just soak in everything that is being said in response to those students' questions. Don't just disregard what other people are asking and what the response is. Just try to absorb as much as you can and then try to kind of emulate those students and ask your own questions, because that will be very, very, very helpful for your academic experience.
It's so fascinating to reflect on what we thought of our cohort and the people around us, right? And often the people who were asking the question had no idea, right? They were coming off in this way. So it's a very sort of funny moment.
Yeah, I had no idea what I was asking about. It's probably purely performative. Don't worry, Lisa. There was never any substance to the question. But I think that there is obviously a discrepancy between some students who are far more perhaps outwardly confident and expressive, and you think that they must be the ones that have got it going and they're all sorted. Whereas the best conversations and the most intellectually stimulating routes I explored were those quiet conversations that you had in office hours with tutors. While you might be able to kind of explore briefly an idea in a question and answer session to impress your peers and 200 of you are in a room, the real magic sort of happened in 5 or 10 minute discussions, or perhaps even longer, either with personal tutors, but primarily with module tutors, where you could actually really get down and explore, and there was a real relationship that was kind of built up there. And so while I may have asked questions, I certainly didn't learn anywhere near as much as I did, and didn't get anywhere near as excited by ideas and concepts as I did when I was in a one-on-one setting with those tutors. And I'd really encourage students to make the most of that throughout the entirety of the years, but especially really early on, when you have got, you don't have these kind of already formed ideas, you've got lots of preconceptions, and just to chat them through with personal tutors is a tremendous help.
I'd like to bring Jude into the conversation, because I know that he has many things that he wish he knew in his first week.
Yeah, I think for me, like, the induction week was not really about work so much. It was kind of relaxing your way into UCL and the environment. So I wouldn't put too much stress on yourself in terms of trying to meet reading requirements. Do what you can in the first couple of weeks, kind of acclimatize yourself to, being in classes with other people, and getting used to lectures and things like that. So yeah, no stress during the first week of UCL.
I like that. Enjoy it, right? No stress. Just enjoy this transition, this moment. That I think when I did Cumberland Lodge last year, and Jade was there, and I remember saying to students, like, this is a moment that's going to change the rest of your life. Being here, we don't know how, right? We don't know exactly where you're going to go, what you're going to end up doing, but you're certainly going to be different to had you not come to university, right? It's going to have a massive transformative effect on social, emotional, academic work, and I think bearing that in mind and sort of soaking it in, which is what Jude just said, is a great idea. I guess I wanted to kind of move the conversation on a little bit. In earlier discussions this morning, when we were sort of having a workshop about all of this, something that came out that was really powerful to me was this idea of finding your anchor in the department, right? And so you've done your first week and you've been overwhelmed and you've met everyone, and you're sort of finding your way and having settling in, I guess, to London and life in the department. And one of the things that came up so much in all of our discussions was this importance of finding your anchor. And obviously there's certain institutional setups to help you do that. One is the personal tutoring system. There's the resources external to the department. There's this thing called transition mentors. There's the History Society, which we have 2 representatives on here. But I just love the concept of the finding your anchor. And I wonder if, some of you might want to talk a little bit about what that experience has been, whether it just happened, or whether it was something that you kind of knew about, and so you tried to build it and find that anchor. And I know some of you found anchors in unexpected places, right? It wasn't necessarily your personal tutor or a module tutor, it might have been another student. So yeah, I'd just be really interested to think a little bit about that. And maybe Jade could start us off on that question.
So for me, first few weeks of uni were very, very tough, because I suffered from anxiety and depression. So that was a really big change for me. It's a really big change for anyone, but that especially made it like a super hard time for me. I also missed Freshers Week, so I can attest to the fact that you definitely should go to all the induction events because they help massively. So yeah, I kind of had to find an anchor elsewhere because I didn't have that introductory week worth of meeting people. My personal tutor Eleanor was a massive help. She sat me down when I did come for the first week of teaching, and she was just kind of asking where I was at, and I was like, to be honest, I feel like I'm drowning a bit. I don't really know what to do. I'm a bit all over the place, and I kind of basically told her that I suffer from mental health issues. This is making all of this so much harder. And she was a really useful person to point me in the right direction of UCL based support. So UCL have really good mental health services. They offer counselling. They offer referrals to institutions around London. And honestly, without that in my life throughout these 3 years, I don't know what I would have done, because it was such a relief to me, because I was worried I'd have to pay or that it would interrupt my studies, and none of that's true. So I've benefited from therapy ever since I came to university, all 3 years. It's been a massive help, and it's just the fact that the university set it all up just made it such an easy process for me to get the help I needed. And I just think, for me, having that someone there to speak through how my mental state was and how uni was affecting that, just made me able to enjoy my university experience a lot more. And I feel like having your personal tutor as a route to point you in the right direction for support is such a valuable resource that everyone should feel they're able to exploit. So
I'll add about the transition mentor. So I found that position as a really, really helpful way of kind of getting to grips with university life, but in an informal setting. So the guy that I had was very, very smart. He was telling me all about how to do essays and things like that, but he would kind of do it, say do you want to go meet in a cafe and discuss it casually over a coffee? And it's a really nice way of getting to grips with UCL, but in a kind of relaxed manner, and not this kind of formal one-on-one meeting with a personal tutor, which is great. It definitely has its perks, and I encourage anyone to kind of go and do that. But definitely try and speak to your transition mentor, because the advantage that they have that a tutor might not is that they've been in your position and they've gone through the system, and and they're also wise as well from having the 2 extra years of experience or whatever.
But Jude, I just wonder, if I'm a new student arriving in UCL History, how do I find a transition mentor? I mean, is this something that I
go out and look for? You know, what's the process of discovering that relationship and nurturing it?
So I think from what I could, because I applied for it, but I didn't get the position. But so second year students will apply to be a transition mentor. And I guess the first great thing is that they're kind of handpicked by the department in terms of whether they're suitable, so they know like how to deal with like incoming students. And then from my knowledge is that the transition mentors are then assigned to the students that sort of come in, the prospective students, and then they will be like instructed, I think, several times per week to kind of guide students through the system, what to expect, how to do essays, meet deadlines and readings and things like that. I think there are transition mentors here. I'm not, I can't remember, but they might have more like personal experience if they want to add.
It's so fascinating, and it's really interesting to think about both Jade and Jude finding quite different anchors, right? So for Jade, it was the formal personal tutor who really opened up the world of all of the available resources at UCL, whether it's student wellbeing and support, mental health services, and sort of advice, right, about that transition, and that's so wonderful. And I know that you're going to talk about that on another panel in greater detail, that relationship. And for Jude, it was also a sort of formal relationship, but with a peer, with someone who's been here for a couple of years, which maybe is less scary in some ways, less intimidating to sort of talk to them about their experience. You can really see they did go through that transformation more recently. But I wanted to bring in, someone who's not yet a third year and is still finding their anchors, right? Someone who's just finished the second year, and how have you gone about building all these anchors in the departments?
So something that's quite interesting is that Lisa was actually my transition mentor in first year. Lisa is a history with a year abroad student as well, like me, and that was really great. So if you're a history with a year abroad student, your mentor will be history with a year abroad, which is so helpful because they basically just explain what's happening, because when you enter first year, they don't really tell you what's happening with that until like second year. And then I don't know, I just thought having a transition mentor was great. And Lisa was a great one because it was just so relaxed. And if you had any questions, even if it was social or academic, she would always help us. And I remember the night before our first deadline, everybody was on our chat, like messaging Lisa, asking how to do this. And I was actually lucky enough to have Lisa doing one of the same modules as me. And Lisa did a Latin American module that in first year that I was doing, and she sent me all her notes from that module that I used in my exam. And it's just stuff like that, but also more than that, because Lisa was the president of the History Society at the time, I was very lucky that she would always encourage our entire group, her mentor group, to go to the bar crawls and the pub crawls. And also she was always encouraging us to go to Loop because she loves Loop. So it was great because I really enjoyed the social and academic help that a transition mentor gave. And I also got our group also became really close, and Electra and Jimmy, some other people in our year, were all very close friends still because we had a very close group, and that was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think honestly I had a great mentor group. I was very, very lucky with the people that I got, but I do know that other student mentors, they do struggle to sometimes get the turnout because a lot of people don't understand how useful this resource is, and I think it really is not emphasized enough sometimes. But I think the first thing that you need to do, apart from obviously the History Society, make sure that you have that connection with your transition mentor, because most transitions mentors, they have been in your position. They're not really going to ever ignore you, or they're not going to be like, don't message me after a certain time, because they know how you feel. And if you are anxious at 1 a.m. and they're still up, they will be willing to help you because they know what you've been through. And I think definitely use that as much as you can.
It's really nice as a member of staff, who's always dealing with students and having kind of low, not enough time ever to really be with everyone as much as we need to, as much as we'd like to be, to hear about this really thriving academic community within the undergraduate population, right, through this mentorship, transition mentor scheme. And it's really wonderful to hear all these great experiences. I wonder, Jade, if you have anything that you'd like to add to that about transition mentoring.
I was just going to say that with History Society, it's quite similar dynamics. So the committee each year is obviously elected from different years so this year we had second years and third years on committee. And the committee is a good port call to have, like, in case you have any questions. I have so many people that message me all the time, like asking about essays, or they're asking about the history events that we're running, or they're asking about like our social events. And I'm basically like a good port of call, like, and that's what the president functions to do, like, and anyone in the committee really. We all have our contact details on like our Facebook pages. And so, yeah, I think that's another good informal channel to like seek advice from someone that's probably been through exactly what you're going through as well.
I think what all of the girls have been saying is so right, and I think it really broadly speaks to the idea that it's so important as a university student to find yourself a community of some stripe, be it the academic community. You can have multiple communities. You can be on a sports team, you can be a member of a society, an ethnic society, a faith-based society. There are so many of these things because UCL is such a large university. There are just so many societies. There's so many societies for everything. There was even a sword fighting society that Jude was mentioning in one of our chats earlier. And you can find and seek out these groups whereby you have an ability to put an anchor in there and have a different group of friends from your history department, or even within the department itself, that really sort of sustain you from a social standpoint, sometimes also from an academic standpoint, throughout the 3 years. And even if things are virtual this year, seeking out and trying and experiencing the benefits of societies and community groups that are based and located on campus, I think is something I think we'd all probably echo is a really, really important and powerful thing that can really help you through the 3 years of study.
So, when I first meet undergraduate students in their first year as a personal tutor, so I serve as the personal tutor and look after the pastoral care of 25 students from their first year through to their final year, and I see them the whole way through. And obviously, I really see the way in which a lot of students do build anchors, with me, and sometimes at different times. You might see personal tutors more at the beginning, maybe more at the end of their degree, not so much in the middle. And sort of everyone has their own way of doing it. But one of the things that really strikes me is that in those early meetings in the first weeks, there's often so much anxiety about grades and folks worrying about whether or not they're going to be good enough, whether or not they sort of seem to have a desire or aim to get a sort of equivalent of an A, right? And this is like the big thing. And if they don't do it, it's going to be a failure. And as a personal tutor, it's really hard for me to sort of, or I really try to convey that it's not, being here isn't about the grades, especially not in the first year. And being here is about developing skills, about learning how to do history, learning what history is, which is very different from the A-level experience. And so I just wonder, did any of you have that kind of anxiety? I mean, for me, I always try to talk to people to understand it better and understand what it is that's generating that sort of anxiety. And maybe it's just the massive difference between the A-level way of studying history to what you're expected to do at university. And so I'm just interested to think about, did you experience any of that fear and anxiety, and how maybe did you overcome it or learn that, to enjoy the degree, which is what we're all sort of here to do, right? And to actually develop some skills. So I'm wondering, maybe, Jude, I know we've spoken about this over the years because you've been a student of mine, and we've really discussed this issue of managing those expectations and learning to enjoy the work. Maybe you might want to start us off a little bit.
Yeah, so I was someone in first year and to an extent second year as well that really struggled with, I think, kind of getting the grades that I wanted to get. Like everyone kind of wants to get first immediately when they start off with university, and that simply doesn't really happen unless you're like rarely super smart. But so for me, what I would say is that history is kind of like a developmental process. We kind of go through the years picking up these skills, and I think when you come out of it, from my point of view in third year, it's the thinking that's the most important, and the grades is just kind of like, it's more a reflection of the advanced thinking and skills that you're picking up as you go along. And I'd also say as well, I used to compare myself quite a lot to what other people were getting, how they were working, the amount that they'd read, and comparing my workload to their workload. And I think that can be really pressuring, and put a lot of weight on your own ability to work and meet these expectations that you're putting up for yourself, as well as other additional pressures that you're perhaps dealing with at the time. So I would say focus on your own abilities, and don't expect immediate results, because it's all part of a long-term process.
Sorry, I would definitely like agree with you how it is a developmental process. Like there's a reason the degree is weighted like 135 over the 3 years, because you know it's perfectly reasonable that when you first start, things are going to be more difficult. And I think like one of the shocking things is you come out of school and you've probably been getting like, I don't know, 80% to get like the A grades that you needed to get into university. And then, you know, your grades will look a lot lower than that when you come to university, but actually, yeah, that's perfectly normal. It's just a different way of marking and a different standard. I think that's definitely something to prepare yourself for, so that you don't get into university and think you're just doing absolutely rubbish if you get like 65. Like that's a really good grade, a strong 2-1 when you get to university.
I think it's also important to emphasize that it's a completely different way of thinking about history. So at school and at A level, I mean, there is just history. But when you come to university, there are so many different strands of history and ways to think about history. There's social history, there's economic history, there's political history, and you'll learn all of this, and all this information will be thrown at you. And it is quite overwhelming, but it's also very exciting because it gives you an opportunity to really delve into it and realize what you most enjoy about history as a discipline. And I think in terms of like writing essays, it's really important to remember that it's not like A level where there's a tick box list of things that you need to include or a certain way you need to answer a question. There is more flexibility at university level, and actually you'll be rewarded for thinking and approaching things differently in a way that A level curriculums don't really appreciate. And so my biggest advice for like first year is just to really like be adventurous in what you want to, how you approach things and what you want to study, because first year especially is that time to like figure out what it is you like about history as a discipline and really explore different avenues and ways to approach things.
I mean, I was just going to add on to what Jade said, because I had exactly that experience in first year. Didn't know what I wanted to do, had to choose my modules, chose medieval universe and Latin American history. Medieval universe, realized that was not my thing and I'm not a medieval historian, but Latin American history, I chose it completely by accident. It was kind of my pick of the bunch, something I've never done before. And now I'm going on 3 years and I've done 4 modules in Latin American history. I think now I've done 5, but yeah, just because I had more modules in my year abroad. But definitely just take your pick of the bunch in first year, go wild with it, because your grades don't really matter, so don't worry about doing well, just find something you're interested in. Just, I think everyone here will agree on that.
Yeah, I think an important thing for me was I remember in second year doing this module on it's like an intellectual module on modern China, and it kind of blew my mind, like in terms of like how you think about history and people and politics, etc. And I think that is like a really good way to indicate progress in the terms of your thinking and the way you interact with like seminars and tutors and the students in your class. So I think like that, focusing on the thinking is definitely something that I would like emphasize, and less on the kind of, you know, grade obtaining. That will just come over time.
It's so wonderful to hear you all, you know, as having now transitioned towards the end of your degrees, thinking, you know, about the actual practice of history and all the skills that you've developed and learned, and the exciting things you're thinking about, and how, you know, the grade is just, it just reflects the skills you had at that particular moment, right? And it's sort of normal and natural that you're going to have different skills in your first few weeks and months of the first year versus what you write in your dissertation. And I think in our earlier discussions, it came up, this topic of how everybody's marked on the same mark scheme, right? Whether you're in your first year or your fourth year. So obviously you're not going to have the experience and the skills that someone who's been through 3 or 4 years has had. And I think that's a very different thing, because in school, everybody's marked based on the year group in which they're in, right? So you're suddenly kind of entering this academic community and learning the tools of the trade and how to think. And it's so wonderful. You know, I think it shows the strengths of the department and all of the wonderful teaching that happens in our department, that all of you who've done such different things have kind of come towards the end of this period as, you know, really excited and passionate about history and understanding all of the value it has and the way it's helping you think and the skills you've gained alongside it. And one of the things that was really striking to me in our earlier discussions
was this notion of thinking about the department or your experience in the department as sort of building blocks, right? Everything that you do is a building block in your degree, right? Your history degree, and then whatever you go on to do later. And thinking about all of the sort of skills and ways of thinking that you've learned through those building blocks. And one of the things that we were thinking about a lot in this department, we make a big effort to try and give you some sort of introductory concepts and approaches to history that will hopefully serve as the building blocks for the rest of your degree. So I'm just wondering, have any of you ever thought about the degree in that way, you know, as a sort of everything's a building block? And I guess hopefully the reflection will also help new students feel less anxious about, you know, not impressing their tutors or themselves in those first weeks and months, right? Because everything is building on each other. So I don't know, Jude, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me, like, I can call them mistakes now. Like, let's say, like, I made like bad essays or whatever in first or second year, but I think you almost learn from like the errors or, you know, like blunders that you might have made in certain essays. So I would view them as more like, you know, formative years that help build up your like intellectual like thought process or thinking. And yeah, not like be too disheartened by like your performance.
I've got quite a similar experience. So in first year, I wrote an essay on like economic history. I mean, at least the question was to do with economic history, but I tried to take it in a social history direction, and my tutor really didn't like that. But then that made me realize, oh, maybe I should do social history. So now I like specialize in gender history, and if it hadn't been for like that bad essay that got that my tutor was just like, yeah, you didn't take it in the right direction, really, like that's not really what the question was asking, I would have found like my niche and what I enjoy. So yeah, I think like take criticism in your first few years, especially like as constructively as possible, because the tutors at the end of the day aren't there to like be harsh, they're there to like help you and like help you develop. And I think in terms of like building blocks, like your the compulsory modules in first year and so approaching history now will really help you in ways that you don't really expect at the time. So I remember at the time that you have these compulsory modules, everyone's kind of sitting there like, when are we ever going to use this concept, or when are we ever going to use this scholar? But it actually does crop up way more than you'd think, and you'll like be reading something for another module one day and a name will come up and you'll be like, I know that name because of approaching history. And it is really handy, and a lot of things you don't realize the benefit until you're in your like latter years of your degree, and they really are beneficial.
Yeah, I've had the same flop story from did my research seminar in second year. It was my third choice, I think, and I just decided to go for it because why not? Decided to branch out. And even though I didn't get an amazing grade, just because I did my research on opium in colonial Burma, that kind of set me on a path of looking more into the history of drugs, history of substances, and this line between the legal and illegal substances and how it goes from one to the other. And if I didn't do that module, and if I went with something that I knew, like a Latin American research seminar, I would have never found my interest in another area.
My point kind of branches slightly off purely from the academic, but it kind of relates to like how you do history almost. So when I was like writing, I think 3 essays in second year, I handed in each of them late and lost 10 marks on each. So it's like mistakes like that. Like obviously at the time I was devastated. But you know, now in third year, like I was like, don't ever do that again. Like, you know, reference properly, hand your essays in on time, you know, yeah, basically like you learn from your mistakes regardless.
Yeah, I would say that I think the degree is definitely a building block, just because you have so much freedom to choose what you want to do. And I've sort of branched out, especially in second year, not really as much in first year, funnily enough, but more in second year, and done things that I didn't know if I was going to be interested in. And I sort of took a risk, and I would really recommend doing that. And even if final year I'll hone down more on what I really want to do, by doing, as everybody's been saying, by doing all these different modules which are available at UCL, and also interdepartmental modules and modules at even other universities, like Jade has done a dissertation at Queen Mary, I think it's really great. So, for example, I did Chloe's research seminar this year, which is on the Black Atlantics, and I wrote a 5,000-word essay on these two sources in 15th and 16th century West Africa, which is something I've never really looked at. And as Chloe said in my introduction, I'm actually more interested in American history, but I'm really interested in race history in America, and particularly how they interact with other countries. And I think it was really important learning about, say, the European-African encounter, learning about how they interacted it, and then sort of putting it in a modern context with how America interacts with, say, China and Southeast Asia and stuff like that. So I think it's really great in UCL how they encourage you to do all these different modules, which will really help you discover what you like, even if you don't think it will and it's completely off the beaten track.
Yeah, in terms of the whole building blocks idea, I would definitely say it's a positive, because so many of the things that I think we found was challenging when we first started the degree, which are things like learning about historiography, like applying theories of history, which, at least from my experience, I had no experience of in school. And some of those skills and areas of history that you study that are most challenging at that point become the most rewarding part of our degree, and what kind of makes it what it is, I think.
It's so fascinating and wonderful to hear you all reflect on this developmental process, the building blocks of the degree. And I think whatever studies you do, whether you go into postgraduate studies or whatever job or career you go into, everything's a building block, right? Every year, every month that you do things. And it's just so wonderful to hear about all of your diverse experiences and how much you've gotten out of it, and how much recognizing that those building blocks has helped to kind of reduce that sort of anxiety about performance. And grades are often kind of arrests a lot of incoming students, not usually for very long, but it's definitely there, feeding this kind of personal relationship to marks. And so I'm really glad to hear that, you've all grown into really strong and wonderful thinkers and historians. And I had wanted to ask us a question about, learning how to enjoy the degree and sort of what that experience has been. I think in many ways you've touched on it, but maybe in our next panel, when we talk about what is the life of a UCL history student, we'll touch on that in greater detail. Because I think one of the things that students maybe don't imagine is just how enjoyable it is, how enjoyable the work we do is, how wonderful it is to go and spend a few weeks researching something you never thought, you never even knew existed, and you never thought it was a debate, and sort of that intellectual journey. And I can really tell from your conversations how important that's been for all of you. And I think as a new student, allowing yourself to take those risks and find those moments of intellectual curiosity and going with it, regardless of whether or not the essay works, right? And sort of and seeing it as a building block to something else. So someone whose research essay was a bit risky but might not have worked, you might be taking the methods and the approach that you thought about with that into other work and allowing you to develop new areas of knowledge.